Goodbye Volcano High is a cinematic narrative game about the end of an era and the beginning of a love story. Developed by Montreal-based studio Co-op, the game explores coming-of-age themes told through a cast of teenage dinosaurs. Rock out with your band, worry about graduation, and come to terms with your impending extinction from an asteroid. Goodbye Volcano High should be celebrated for its incredibly human story, the smooth soundtrack, and novel approach to interactive gameplay. But does the overall experience live up to the sum of its parts? Listen on for our review of Goodbye Volcano High. So this game is something that's been on your radar for some time, and I think the first time I saw the visual, instantly I was like, this is such an Arief game. And just a few moments ago, we watched the trailer together, and again, I was like, this is literally the Arief game. I don't know a lot about it beyond that, so I'm really excited to hear your thoughts about it, because I know you just finished the game, right?
Yeah. And maybe just like as a layup. So this episode is kind of like our official review of Goodbye Volcano High. So what I want to do is kind of like talk through a little bit of my experience with the game overall. Maybe talk about like why I was excited about the game beforehand, because I've been eyeing this game for the past 3 years or so when it debuted, and then see if those expectations kind of were met after playing it. I'd also kind of talk about like the details of Goodbye Volcano High. But yes, I can confirm, Reno, like Goodbye Volcano High is such an Arief game, and it is like to a T, and it is so hilarious because I'll get to like the details of the game in a second, right? But in the lead up to it, I was like, oh, I like this game. I'm totally gonna like this game. I'm totally gonna like this game. And then even as I'm playing it like 3 years later after that realization, there are moments in this game where I like, it speaks to me and me only. No, obviously it speaks to a lot of people, but I was like, do you know me? Like, is this like, because it's the creative decisions that they do in this game that are so aligned with the creative decisions that I would have done. And you know, like creativity is an artist's objective, but it's so funny how well aligned it is to me. But I guess as a layup, Goodbye Volcano High is what they describe as a story-driven, choice-based cinematic adventure game, where you follow Fang, the protagonist of this game, in their adventures, like their high school adventures throughout Volcano High, where there's a looming threat of a meteor that's going to crash into the world and potentially destroy everything. So it's one of those like high school drama, Bildungsroman, like coming of age story that centers around music, your relationships, and this existential threat that kind of like propels everything into motion. So that's the layup to Goodbye Volcano High.
Can I say why I think it's an Arief game without having played it? I mean, the main character is like this goth girl in a black crop top and black torn jeans, like, and she plays the guitar. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's also. Yeah, go ahead.
Just and when the trailer came on and the music, I'm like, this is something from your playlist that you would listen to anyway, like irrespective of the game.
100%. Yeah. And it's like, I think it should be mentioned. It's super interesting because I wasn't aware of this like in the lead up to the game, but Fang, the protagonist, is also like non-binary. So they were like, you know, they put it in the preface of the game. It's like Fang is a character that you play as, and yes, total like goth style, is the like goth girl ripped jeans kind of like aesthetic, and it's such a vibe and a mood. But it's quite interesting because I wasn't expecting too much like of this story arc, but it also deals with, you know, Fang being non-binary and, you know, figuring that in their high school, like, I guess, life, and then kind of like dealing with the, you know, the beauty that comes with it, but also the trials and tribulations that comes with that. But in addition to like all of that, you're so right with the art style, the character design, the music. Literally the music is one of those moments, Reno, where I was like, I have a whole playlist that sounds exactly like the entire like Goodbye Volcano High soundtrack, because, you know, as somebody who like, and maybe for those that don't know as well, it is like the gameplay itself is it centers around music, so you oscillate between narrative decisions and you know, cutscenes, but part of the major gameplay is actually kind of like a rhythm style, kind of like Guitar Hero-esque, you know, gameplay session. But every single time, but when you're going through it, is like you are playing the music of this game, right? But it's just so aligned with the stuff that I don't know, this like post-punk kind of energy where, I don't know, I let you know how much I love Boy Genius right now, but like, you know, back when I was listening to Lucy Dacus a couple of years ago, it's like that type of like soulful, mellow, sad, but yet like very punk rock kind of vibe. And I love it so much. There's so much to talk about this game. But yes, it is such an Arief game. I love everything about it.
Are you okay? You've come into this year kind of intense with the band stuff.
I can just quickly wrap up a bit about what I know from what I've seen from the trailer, and then I would just really like to get your thoughts on what the actual gameplay is like, and more about the visual novel aspect, the decision tree, other different endings, things like that. The second thing I just wanted to say about the trailer is that there were like towards the end, there's like sort of like little blurbs or like little snippets of conversation between the characters. And I just love that whole like, at that age when you're like, 16 or 17 and everything means so much. Like, of course, like not to like diminish like the problems of a teenager, but I just remember that feeling of like, oh wow, like this conflict between my friend is like life or death to me. And I love that they are able to sort of convey that. And I think that's why these like coming of age stories are so important. And to what you were saying as well about the main character being non-binary, I didn't know that, but I think like that's why a lot of TV shows, like teenage TV shows, are so important, because it is about that kind of growing phase of like going from a teenager to an adult. And it's great that they're highlighting, a new experience, one that's probably not as often highlighted about, being non-binary. It's a very unique experience as well.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. And this is like kind of a perfect transition to like really at the core of it, like what is Goodbye Volcano High? And, to your point about what this game is and what it's trying to say, it's all about transition. And I mean that like the core of Goodbye Volcano High is all about like learning from others and how you want to change yourself to be the person that you want to be, and reflecting on your present, your past, and obviously like paving forward to the future, right? And that comes into so many examples, whether it be, like you said, decision trees, which I want to get into in a second, of why I think this game is super innovative and extremely modern when it comes to gameplay, like decision trees and dialogue trees or dialogue options. But before I get to that, it's like, Reno, I don't know, I just feel like this is one of those games where all the details kind of add to the larger picture of what this game is trying to say. So you have surface level moments where it's like, yeah, there are moments where, they tackle, being queer and coming out to your family and how that, I guess, impacts your relationship with your friends as well in your general social life. But then you have this like existential threat of a meteor, which is really funny. This premise that like this world of dinosaurs are, about to experience a meteor that's going to crash into their town. But that existential threat propels everything into motion. And it's like, it's all existential as well. It's like you're in that time in high school where the future is so ambiguous and everybody goes on their different paths. So either you go to college or you don't, or you move out of town or you stay in town, or all those kinds of things. It's so cool how they use this, it's very typical in these storytelling things, but that aspect of the meteor as well, kind of like making all these characters question everything. But I really want to touch on the details of this game, because I really think this is one of those games that is like almost a sleeper hit, where there are 100 tiny things that contribute to the beauty of Goodbye Volcano High. That is not just the music, that is not just the story, that's not just the gameplay, but I think is like so well worth like your time in 2023, because it's so weirdly modern.
We've always done what you wanted to do, and that's fine. But there's only so much time we have left.
You jump into the game and you're immediately, it's like, that like in media res where you're starting at the end of the game. So you see a little cutscene at the end of the game where all Fang and their group of friends are all over a bonfire, kind of like you're thrust in the middle of the story, and then it cuts to like a flashback. So you play through the entire game leading up until that point, right? Yeah. So the general gameplay is that it's third person. It's almost as if you're watching a cartoon. I know on the 20M podcast we brought up so many times that cartoon inspired video games are really making a big hit right now. But when I say you are literally playing a cartoon, you are literally playing a cartoon, because the shots, the angles that they're using and all the animation style, if there weren't those little UI things, it would 100% be an animation, which is like, I think so beautiful, because the polish on the animation is like high quality, like cartoon that you would watch, But in terms of the gameplay, it's like you're just moving from scene to scene, you're experiencing the story, and you are going through the perspective of Fang. So you hear a lot of their internal monologue, as well as like you decide on behalf of them of what decisions you're going to make. And then it intersplices, like I said earlier, this like the rhythm, real-time rhythm kind of like mini games, if you will. So there are multiple songs throughout the game that you go through, which I feel like is pretty typical. There are decision trees. So like you can get closer to your friends and family or whatever characters are around you. And all of that impacts the story at the end of the day. There are no multiple endings, for the record. There's only one ending, but you can unlock further like relationships, like dialogue and cutscenes, depending on the decisions that you make with certain characters throughout the game. So I feel like you're right. It's so typical of like these visual novel style storytelling games, but that's your day-to-day gameplay.
Interesting. So I guess I kind of assume that, I guess, from the way the trailer lays it out, like there's one true ending, but then do multiple playthroughs if you want to get to know everyone's backstory? That's kind of how.
Yeah, and it's like that's exactly it. It's like you get to know, like there's a closure element to the end of the game, like much like a lot of other games in this style, right? Where it's like you can progress the relationship to 100%, and then maybe you'll get something out of there. But then there are moments where like, oh, you can't choose. You can tell that you can't choose that character's ending, if you will, like the closure, if you will. But I'll say that, like, you know, bringing this back to like why I think that is also representative of the beauty of the game, is that the most mind-blowing thing about this game is its like UI UX design. It's I think I wrote this down as like what they call it. They call it a interaction designer is like the title of the person that they have here, which is the first time I've seen that kind of title, as opposed to like, you know, UI designer, UX designer, that kind of stuff. But I don't know if you've seen some of those options, but the way that you choose dialogue is that you have a little like 3 options at the bottom of your screen. Typical to what other games, you know, dialogue decisions in other games. But the more you play the game, the more you realize that those things tend to change. So for example, if Fang is really excited about an answer and you can tell that they're really passionate about that answer, it'll like be a little bit bubbly, it'll be a little bit brighter, and it'll like illuminate. So you could tell that the emotion of that is like, okay, that's how you know Fang is gonna respond in giving this answer. And then if you feel that there's anger and there's conflict, and you know, if somebody says something that really pisses you off, you can tell there's like a break in the line itself. So like the visual cues from a gameplay standpoint, I think is so flipping modern. And I don't know, I bet there are the games that do this, but it's the first time I've ever experienced this thing where like the emotions are actually immediately conveyed other than just a color, like red, green, blue, that kind of stuff, where like there's particle effects and all that kind of stuff with the dialogue that you're choosing. So I feel like that immerses you even more in this game, which I think is mind-blowing. But to touch on the UI UX, there's like so much to flipping talk about, because let me tell you like one of the most mind-blowing things about this game, right? You nailed it. As like a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever have you, you're high school, you're always in your head thinking about the things that you're saying, or you might say the wrong things, or you're just overanalyzing your social scenarios a lot, right? The way they do the dialogue where to depict that moment is so cool, because the first time that happened to me, I saw 3 dialogue options. And then you could tell that Fang is actively thinking about not wanting to mess up the dialogue. The dialogue options start to change. And you're trying to choose the dialogue option that's correct in that scenario with the given time, because every dialogue has like a time window. And so I'm like trying to choose the right option, and I'm like, do I do up? Do I do left? Do I do right? But they're all switching like really quick. And it made me genuinely feel like, oh my God, this is like the epitome of like just communication in general, you know, like not being able to choose the right words or say the right things, but you have to give an answer to the person. So I think those small things are awesome. And then there's also moments where you're in a heated argument with your brother, for example, right? And you want to say this piece of dialogue. And then I read that piece of dialogue. I'm like, oh, that's kind of mean, right? And then I hover over the dialogue, and then it flips over, and it actually doesn't allow you to choose that dialogue. And it says there, it's like, oh, maybe I'll regret this. Like, that's actually too uncalled for. I don't want to say that, or something along those lines, right? So from a storytelling perspective and a gameplay perspective, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I wish, like, you know, games are supposed to be role playing. You're supposed to go through each option and things like that. But the fact that it's actually leading you in a certain direction, but through these stylistic choices, elevate the experience for me completely. Where I think this game is one of those things where they want you to experience the story that they want you to experience, rather than you to completely put your role-playing fantasies into it. But they do it in a way with such class and such finesse that I haven't experienced in a visual novel storytelling cinematic experience like this before. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I'm sure I can try to put some visual aid, but like, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, like, just watch the trailers of Goodbye Volcano High, and maybe we can put some stuff up there. But the genuine like gameplay experience feels so new and fresh, despite it being majority just choosing dialogue.
I think that's such an interesting thing, and you really hit it the nail on the head in one of the last things you were saying, because I feel like the way that like narrative forward games, or like I guess visual novels, they're kind of like two sort of directions I'm seeing. Like one where I've seen a lot of developers, a lot of games boast about like multiple endings, like freedom of choice, like super, like it's like an open world almost, but like narrative driven. And it's for players who I guess want to like almost self-insert and be like who they are. Like, I want to be in there as Rino, you want to be in there as Arief. But then you have games like Goodbye Volcano High, and it's like, no, we have this story and it's fixed, it's our vision, and we want you to feel what Fang is feeling, and that's why they've got all those cool little interaction things, which is really interesting because that gives you a sense of what the character is feeling, right? Like, and you can sort of role play as a character a bit more, whereas like the other way would be more like making it very neutral and sort of leaving it up to you, right? So I feel like that is really cool. I've not seen that in games I've played so far. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, it experiments with this style and this format of the game in a way that is so new to me. And I'll quickly mention that like this game premiered at the reveal showcase of the PlayStation 5, which is very interesting. This is still for the most part, an independent game, a shorter experience. I think my playthrough took, I think it around the 6-hour mark or slightly less, right? So it is a game that you can kind of go through within a weekend, which is kind of what I recommend in just a couple of sittings. But this premiered at the PlayStation 5 reveal event. And, to this point of like experimentation, but doing things in a new way, it's so cool to me because like, there's a small things where because it's optimized for the PlayStation 5, I guess like they got a lot of support from the PlayStation. It also, it even has these small details where like the DualSense reacts in a way that a AAA game would react for like this game that you're playing. Like, if you're thinking about Ghost of Tsushima or God of War and you can really feel like what's going on here, it is mind blowing to me that, I don't know, I'll give you one example, right? When you're making a hard decision, when you can tell it's a hard decision for Fang and it's like it has a lot of ramifications, you can't just choose the dialogue option like hold left. You have to hold left and then really press down on the triggers, like the haptics on the triggers, to like force your way to like do it. And to me, it's like that is such a cool thing that like these type of experiences, these types of games can be enhanced by tech that exists on the PlayStation, for example, right? But to your point about like all the things like these details really add up to that experience. I think like that's one of them that I had to mention, which was super cool.
No, that is awesome. In terms of the story and the characters, did you find yourself sort of gravitating towards any particular character? Did you find Arief in the game?
I'm everybody in this game in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. No, maybe that's like I'll get to my negatives in a second here, but there were characters that I feel I guess that I gravitated a lot more towards, and then there were others that I didn't too much. So I would say there's around, let's say like 6 or 7 characters that are impactful to the main game. And then you have your band. So I should say that like the story of this game is that you're leading up to the Battle of the Bands that's happening at the end of the year, and you want to make it in this town, and you're with your bandmates, but you're also trying to juggle your social relationships alongside that in high school, right? So your immediate bandmates are the ones that you interact with the most, and you can tell that there's a lot of relationship building there. But then you also have your brother, you have your brother's best friend, and then you have other friends that maybe aren't necessarily in the band, but you interact with on a daily basis too, right? That are also going through their own stuff. So there are really interesting stories. Like I said, I think one of the ones that was like, I think it is surface level, and although it might be a little bit kitschy and I don't know, you're totally trying to like they serve it in the way to you where it's so obvious, like they just have a conversation around it, is a conversation with one of the characters that's transitioning. And they have a whole you have a whole conversation with somebody about like how difficult it is to transition, as also somebody, when you're playing as Fang, who is also non-binary, that is trying to go through a similar type of experience with their like family, right? But there are moments like that which made me really connect with characters. But to be honest with you, it's just the day-to-day. Like with any high school drama type thing, I feel like the moments that I spend with the characters is just seeing them smile and interact with each other and laze around. Like there's obviously like any piece of fiction within this type of genre, there's that montage scene where you're spending the night and day with your bandmates, and you're just lazing around, you're practicing for the show, but at the end of the day it's just like you're just spending time with each other, and there's no dialogue per se, there's no like impactful moment, if you will, but it's just knowing that these people really care and love for each other and have love for each other, even though there might be friction, brought me so close to those characters. I'll say that like, actually one thing that I'll say that I think is slightly interesting that might be a little bit of a side tangent. But so Fang is the name of the character and Nasser is the name of the brother, right? And in this world where you're all playing as dinosaurs at the end of the day, and it's all cartoon characters, and they do have real names and things like that. But I was like, like Nasser's a really interesting choice for like the brother's name. And I thought this in the trailers, I think, like, and when we played the demo like earlier this year, but I had no idea that you basically you get a call from your family who are abroad at this time, right? And then you're talking to your mom, and your mom is like, "Oh yeah, make sure Fatima is taking care of herself or something like that," right? And I'm like, "Oh my god, this is an Arab family, man!" And it's like such a cool thing to intersplice. Like, you know how many times we've like talked about cultural significance in a lot of independent games as well. Like we just reviewed Venba, and we talked about like diaspora stories, but also like Southeast Asian kind of like connections. To me, it's so cool that you can embed, I guess, what we're used to in our world and kind of project that onto this like dinosaur-y kind of world where like not that I can relate too much to like the Arab experience or like our Arab immigrant experience in the United States, but that's really like what this feels like. But it's like, I know there are moments where it's challenging, like Fang specifically mentions that it's challenging for their mother to call them their like current name, right? Like their mother always resorts to Fatima, right? And then it's also like a lot of these cultural things where you have the stoic dad that doesn't really get arts or whatever, but it's kind of goofy, but kind of loving. And it's just like, there are moments that this game humanize these characters, which is such an ironic thing to say when you're watching these dinosaurs with wings and tails like flap around and like are super colorful, right? So just to close on this like character thing is like, there's really interesting culture that they bring into this game that make it so real. And I mean that in like literal, like, I guess like culture and like, you know, whatever have you. But I also mean that in a way where it's like so many people are experiencing so many different things and they really tap into it and really make sure to spend time with it. And then you also have like so many of your tropes. It's like you have the preppy girl, you have the goth girl, you have the like the lazing around, doesn't care about school, and then you have the super like high achiever, and like I don't know. It's like it's an awesome cast of characters.
It's so cool that you mentioned that, because I was literally going to ask, like, I wonder why, like, what was the sort of like design or narrative decision to make everyone dinosaurs? And it's like, well, then it's like the opposite of games like Venba, where it's like we want to bring a certain culture forward, but we want to make it kind of universal in a sense. So we just remove the visual human elements of it, but keep like the culture or make it a little bit fantasy to kind of like keep it a bit separate. So maybe, I mean, I don't know why they made it dinosaurs, but it sounds like that kind of like little, not an Easter egg, but like a little tidbit that you find out later on is super cool. But on the topic of dinosaurs, I mean, like I gotta ask, I'm sure everyone is wondering this, like, is there furry potential in this game?
It's not where I thought that was going. I mean, probably, absolutely. I actually am really curious about the fan. I've heard a little bit about the community, and I feel like it has been rampant in the past. But like, I guess like absolutely, they're literally like. The cool thing, and this is such a nerdy dinosaur thing, but you know that adage where like dinosaurs are actually so much more closer to like the average bird right now, and
Chickens,
used to have feathers, yeah. And it's like that's not our conceived perception of dinosaurs, at least when we were growing up. But like so many of these characters have like a lot of feathers as well, so like literally they are furry in some way. Yeah, no, but it goes back to like to answer this question in a way that also is kind of like serious, whilst also like in jest as well. It's like the character design is immaculate. Like the amount of like variety that you see, because there's so many characters in this game that you see in the background as well, and all of them are kind of, they're not like this is a T-Rex, this is a Velociraptor, this is a Triceratops. They're all like an amalgamation of all of them, but they feel so how do you say this? It's like they are, at the end of the day, they remind you of people that you know in your life, which I feel like can be insulting. But it's like the way they're able, you forget you're playing a game full of dinosaurs sometimes when you're experiencing this, because the character design and the way they speak and the way they interact and move are so human. I just think it's so flipping cool. But yes, furry potential very high. I could see people fawning over these characters left, right, and center. You know.
And just a quick check as well. Like this is a fully voiced game. Like every character has a voice actor behind them.
Yeah, there's only one segment I would say where you play this like D&D ripoff, if you will. It's called LNL, where that one is like they don't do dialogue because you're playing that like in-game kind of like game, if you will. And so there's a lot of reading, but beyond that, it's fully voiced. So like the songs are sung, the voices like for all the characters for the most part are there. So all the characters you interact with are completely voiced throughout. And I will say like with the music, one thing I maybe neglected to mention as well is that on this note of voicing and dialogue and gameplay that I think is like very unique to the medium is that you can actually choose the lyrics of some songs. So I think that's a really interesting gameplay mechanic where, like, you know, sometimes you would choose the lyrics and then only when you choose all of them will it play the song or something like along those lines, right? This one is like you can actually preview how a line would sound by clicking X, and they would sing, like, the whoever's doing the vocals would sing that part of the song, and there's like, okay, cool, I like that, how that sounds and how it reads, so I'll choose that one, then choose the next one, choose the next one, and then it goes through the entire song. If I'm not mistaken, I think Stray Gods had a similar mechanic. I don't know if it's exactly like in that vein, but it's just such a cool thing to give player agency whilst also immersing yourself in this like storied experience.
Yeah, the reason I bring up voice actors is you know I like my voice actors, and so I had a quick squiz at the cast for Goodbye Volcano High, and the name Allegra Clark came up, and I know you were like, oh, this kind of sounds familiar, and so she was in Stray Gods. She was also Marissa in Street Fighter 6. She's also in Suzume.
Okay, got it. That's so funny. That's awesome.
Why I was like, it's like a lot of stuff that Arief likes in this Arief game. Yeah, so she's kind of like an OG in the English voice acting scene, and I know her predominantly as Beto from Genshin Impact.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, and I will say, like, the voice acting is awesome in this game. I think there was only one moment where I felt like a voice actor was kind of phoning it in. But beyond that, okay. Well, maybe let's celebrate the talent. Let's celebrate, like, yes, it's voiced and it's awesome, and each person has their own personality, and you can really feel like it is like you're literally watching I wouldn't say CW show because that's almost insulting, but like a good high school drama.
I was gonna say
a quality high school drama that's not
reminded me
trashy.
Of Riverdale season 1 before it got crazy.
Yeah,
TV series.
I don't know. Even season 1, like, I'll stand by Riverdale season 1 as like the best season, but it's still not like the best. You know what I mean? Television out there, but I would say this is high quality. It's as if you're watching high quality like television drama. But maybe to transition onto like some of the negatives of this game that I need to mention is that, like, there's this interesting dynamic where, and I think it's so tough for people to nail this, but this has existed in all the art that I feel like is of a certain time, like whether it be like childhood or your teenage years, is that sometimes you can so tell it's written by adults. And this game is so beautiful because it reminds me of Life is Strange so much, which is one of my favorite games of all time, which is very similar in this aspect where high school, like coming of age, a little bit of supernatural things going on. But at the end of the day, it's about like dialogue and decisions and relationships. But Life is Strange, there are some lines that like are so like no teenager would say that. This one has a lot less of that, but you always like dip in and out of that immersion sometimes, where I was like, oh, you sound like a friend of mine, like in their like late 20s rather than somebody who's 17, you know? So I don't know how much of that is like actually true, and like if other people have that experience, but I think that if you're talking about some of the negatives of the game, you could feel that disconnect sometimes in some of the dialogue options. So I just wanted to bring that up. Maybe some other, and also like on that related note is like, maybe this is just a me problem, but I'm really curious to know how people play this game, because as much as I want to role play as Fang and go through Fang's experience in this thing, I feel like I've learned so much in my life, at least like to the point where I am now, where I'm answering these questions as an adult and somebody maybe who's a little bit more emotionally mature than I was, like 100% more emotionally mature than I was in high school. So I've had this conflict, this really interesting battle of like, I feel like I would say this in high school, but now I would totally say this, you know? And it's like, not avoid conflict, but like be a little bit more mature or like calm about everything and like assess that kind of stuff rather than like a little bit more irrational and brash. So that was just an interesting reflection that I had when I was playing this game, where I was like, I don't know how I should be playing this I should be playing this versus how Fang should be playing this, which is such an interesting thing about like game design as a whole. And then I'll also just quickly mention that some moments I think overstayed its welcome, even though it's like relatively short experience. It was an awesome experience, but there were moments where I feel like they could have shaved off a little bit of those like scenes, maybe crescendoed it apart and then cut to the next scene or things like that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that I know they know, in the release that we got and the info that we got, that they are working on bug fixes. But there are some moments at the time of recording, at the time of playing this, where it was like visual hitches, moments here and there that just weren't lining up, or just like swapping of assets that I probably like the code didn't filter the certain way. So there are like some noticeable bugs. It didn't completely ruin the experience by any means, but you can tell it's like, the plight of indie games or making games in general is challenging, but it's something to note that it was buggish. I wouldn't say buggy, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So but I just wanted to close on some of the negative aspects of the game.
So how you play the game is so interesting. It's like, do you like, even just in general, not even with this game, but in broader, like in games itself, it's like, do you play as yourself or do you play as the person you want to be, right? Like, are you always going to pick like the edgy response because you want to be that edgelord sort of like boss character, or do you just play as yourself and you're like, oh, I'm pretty neutral in real life, I'll just pick the neutral response? And I kind of like, depending on how I'm feeling, I think I give a different response. But that's a really interesting point. Like, do I act like the adult, or do I live out my my actual like teenage life and like yell at the character or something like that?
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. So overall, great game. Did it match your expectations?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I guess like to close on my overall thoughts of Goodbye Volcano High is like I can talk about this game to so many people, but less so as maybe somebody who. It's interesting, right? It's like less so as somebody who reviews games and like talks about them in a way where it's like in the context of the greater industry, in the context of like greater significance, but like as a person who, like, if I were to talk to a friend about this game, I would talk about this game so much, So because this is such a me game, like I said, all the creative decisions are so aligned, and I think there's so much beauty in the moments and the story and the music and all of it that it just speaks to me at its core. So this is such a tough one, like reviewing per se, or kind of like wrapping it up, because I think this game might not be for everyone, but if you I don't know how to describe it. It's like if you watch this trailer and you're going to like it, you're going to like this game. Like there's no way around it. You know what I mean? Like you kind of know what you're going to get, which is kind of like maybe where I'll end this like spiel of Goodbye Volcano High, where it's like I feel like in some ways it does play the safe routes where you experience like you can kind of tell where the conflict is going to go. You can kind of tell where moments are going to go. Like not everything is like shocking or surprising. It doesn't have like deep twists here and there, but the level of execution that they operate, whether it be in the way that they deliver dialogue, the way they deliver story, the pacing of all of it, or the moments the characters go through, is not novel but expected, but yet it's executed at such a high level that it's totally okay for them not to bring something completely fresh to the story, right? At the end of the day, I think it's about the intimacy in the game. It's like all the details. Like that is Goodbye Volcano High to me. Every single detail is something you can talk about that impacts the greater experience here. And that to me is what makes Goodbye Volcano High kind of like these must-play scenarios for people who like this stuff. Like if you listen to the soundtrack, if you like the music, you're probably going to like the rest of the soundtrack, right? If you like the visuals, it's like a visual fest. Like it is gorgeous. And if you like this art style, it is awesome what they do with this art style. If you like high school kind of like drama stories, coming of age things, like this is one of those ones where it's not hyper new or hyper twisty or whatever, but it is a great story. It's a beautiful story. And at the end of the day, there's so many heartwarming moments. And I just love that this team, you can tell that there's so much care into this game that they put into this game. But it is one of those, like, in a year with so many stuff coming out, I think this is so worthy to carve out a day or a weekend at max. Like I know Starfield is out. You have Sea of Stars, you have Armored Core. Like you have so many of these games that are going to take so long. Goodbye Volcano High is such a great step back that I just think more people need to genuinely check out if you're not looking for those like hyper immersive 300-hour gameplay experiences. So I did genuinely fall in love with this game, despite some gripes and despite still wanting more at the end of the day. It's a beautiful experience.
It makes me think a lot about like the most recent one example, I guess, is like Vemba, where it's like, it's not that I'm trying to say like this is for the casual gamer. It's almost like I want to say this, I want to recommend this the way I recommend a book or a film to like a friend who might not be playing games. And then the hurdle to that is usually like platform. They don't have Steam, they don't have a PlayStation and things like that. But this feels like a game that, because it's so narrative driven, it's something that it's a beautiful experience that everyone should play, like irrespective of whether you like games or not. It's just like, if this was a TV show, like it would be great, right? That sort of feeling. Yeah. So that's amazing. I definitely want to check this out.
Exactly. And I'm going to put a call out. The last thing I'll say about Goodbye Volcano is I'll put a call out there. Is like, is somebody on the team Southeast Asian? Because the amount of fruits that I saw that are so local and native that I was like, because there's just like fruit bowls in the game, right? I was like, you're under your bed, you're looking for stuff. There's like a mangosteen. And I'm like, like, I've never seen a mango scene in a game before. You know what I mean? Like,
so
and then you're like
interesting.
seeing the fruit basket, you see a dragon fruit. I'm like, who's eating these tropical fruits out there on the yard asset team? You know what I mean? Like, which one of you is like has a Southeast Asian mom that's giving you fruits and like every single time you're working on some art assets in the game?
I hope to God there is someone on the team, because like we see what you're doing.
Or whoever is like from the general like countries that live on the equator kind of a scenario.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love this game, Reno. Like, it's such a me game to close it up, but I had a wonderful time. And again, major love to the team at Co-op for sending us this review code. It's like it's one of those ones that I knew I was going to love it, and I'm so glad I do. But I just so wish there was more, and I can't wait. Like, if there's some side stories or side experiences in this game, I want to live and breathe it. But also at the end of the day, it's such a good compact story, and I don't know. I feel so emotional. I'm going to listen to the soundtrack like every day now.
Yeah, music's awesome. Yeah, that was cool. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and your experiences on Goodbye Volcano High. I think that's mostly it for today. This week's episode. Arief, if folks want to hear more from us, what was the most recent episode they can check out?
Yeah, well, the most recent episode was us covering Animangaki, which I nailed because usually I forget the previous episodes that we do. We went to a local anime convention here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We got to interview Yvonne, the founder, as well. And we spoke about a lot of really cool stuff that we saw, including, the Evangelion Rod collaboration, as well as Suzume, like you mentioned, from Comics Wave, the makers of Your Name. So you check out that episode. It was a really fun, cute, like convention experience that we reflected on. But also, if you want to check out some other game reviews, one of my favorite reviews that we've done on the channel was a review for Raincoat that you did for the Switch. So if you guys are looking for some more games to play out there, you can find some of our reviews on the 20M YouTube channel.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great episode, short and sweet. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next week.
See you, folks. Play Goodbye Volcano High. Cry with me. Experience it with me. I was like headbang, slap the bass or something.